Evelyn Moreau had always been drawn to forgotten places. As a child, she wandered through abandoned houses, letting the scent of dust and decay fill her lungs, imagining the ghosts of past lives lingering in the shadows. But nothing fascinated her more than the Marionette Theater. It stood like a corpse in the center of town, its once grand facade sagging under the weight of ivy and rot. The city couldn't afford to take it down, and some wouldn't dare go near it. The Marionette had always been cursed. Before the theater was built, the land was the site of 3 separate massacres. The first was in 1872, when a traveling carnival passed through town. One night, in the dead of winter, every single performer was found slaughtered, their bodies twisted, their mouths sewn shut. With no explanation and no survivors, the town buried the bodies, burned the remains of the carnival, and tried to forget. The second massacre came in 1899, when a wealthy businessman bought the land to build a grand opera house. On the night of its first performance, a darkness took hold, twisting reality into something nightmarish. In a frenzied display of brutality, the lead performer unleashed a torrent of savagery upon the orchestra. With a blood-stained blade, she meticulously slit each musician's throat, their lifeblood splattering across the stage in a crimson haze. As the final notes of agony faded into silence, she hurled herself into the midst of the audience. There, in a state of manic euphoria, she raked her clawed hands across terrified faces, tearing through flesh and sinew. With a visceral, unrelenting ferocity, she plucked out eyes one by one, leaving a gruesome tableau of carnage and despair in her wake. Witnesses said she kept screaming the same phrase over and over, "Play." The opera house was abandoned, its doors locked and its halls left to fester, the stench of decay seeping into its bones. Years passed, and in 1912, a group of investors swept in, eager to erase its grim history. They razed the crumbling structure to the ground, reducing its haunted remains to dust, and in its place, they erected the Marionette Theater. A fresh start, a new name, a desperate attempt to forget. The horrors of the past were dismissed as misfortune, a string of tragic coincidences, nothing more. The town clung to the hope that, buried beneath the rubble, the curse had been laid to rest. But some knew better. Curses don't die, they wait. On October 31st, 1935, the theater held what would be its final performance. The show was nearly sold out, the audience packed with socialites, artists, and dignitaries. But among them sat a man no one recognized. His name was Edwin Parrish. Parrish had been born deformed, his face a grotesque mask of twisted flesh and misplaced features. His left eye bulged unnaturally from its socket, bloodshot and watery, while the right one was sunken deep into the cavernous folds of his misshapen skull. His nose was a melted ruin, collapsed like wax left too long in the sun, and his lips were gnarled and uneven, pulled into a permanent sneer that exposed yellowed, jagged teeth. His skin, mottled with patches of raw, reddened flesh and deep pockmarks, stretched unevenly across his skull, as if it barely fit the monstrous bone structure beneath. People recoiled at the mere sight of him, their expressions twisting in revulsion before they even realized it. They called him a monster, a mistake of nature, something that shouldn't exist. He had spent his life lurking in the shadows, skirting the edges of society, knowing that the moment he stepped into the light, he would be met with gasps, sneers, and whispered curses. Even the theater, a place known for its love of the grotesque and the macabre, had refused him. Not even as a janitor, not even to sweep the floors after the performances had ended, when no one would have to look at him. But tonight he had found his way inside. Tonight he was in the audience. Edwin dragged a heavy suitcase behind him, its worn leather stretched tight over the arsenal hidden within. Inside, nestled in oily rags, lay instruments of death, cold, metallic, and waiting. A pair of revolvers, their pearl grips deceptively elegant, were fully loaded, eager to spit fire and lead. A sawed-off shotgun, its barrels cruelly shortened, promised devastation at close range. A bolt-action rifle, its scope gleaming like an unblinking eye, was ready to claim targets from the shadows. Loose rounds clattered like restless bones, and tucked beside them, a jagged hunting knife gleamed, its edge thirsty for flesh. Halfway through the performance, as the music swelled to a haunting crescendo, he rose from his seat with eerie calm. The heavy suitcase at his feet snapped open, and in one swift motion, he drew his first weapon, a gleaming revolver with a barrel like a staring, empty eye. The first gunshot shattered the lead actress's skull, sending a spray of blood across the stage. Panic exploded. The audience screamed, bodies crashing over one another in a desperate attempt to escape. But Parrish didn't stop. He fired into the crowd, his laughter a guttural, broken thing. He moved methodically, execution style, placing the barrel of his pistol against screaming mouths, against pleading eyes. By the time the police arrived, 83 people lay dead. Blood soaked the velvet seats, dripped from the balconies like melted wax. The stage was slick with it, a crimson lake pooling beneath the fallen chandeliers. They found Parrish sitting in the middle of it all, humming to himself. When the police raised their guns, he turned the last bullet on himself. The Marionette Theater never reopened. The blood was left to dry, blackening like old tar, seeping deep into the stage and the plush red seats where horrified faces once sat. Windows cracked, doors warped, but no one touched it. No one even spoke of it. The theater stood at the town's heart, a gaping husk of decay, its shadows deep and patient, waiting for someone foolish enough to step inside. Evelyn had read every story, every account of the massacre, but no one could tell her what happened after. The surviving witnesses refused to speak of what they saw before they ran. The reports hinted at something more, something worse than Parrish, something waiting behind the curtain. A quiet curiosity stirred within Evelyn, a gentle but persistent need to see it with her own eyes, to step closer, to take it in, to understand the stories whispered about it. She slipped through the rusted side door one cold October night, the hinges groaning like something waking from a long, uneasy sleep. The air inside pressed against her skin, thick and suffocating, damp with decay and something worse, something sour, metallic, and rotten. A faint, sickly scent of old blood clung to the wooden beams, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the violence that once stained them. Rows of broken velvet seats stretched out before her in eerie silence, their tattered fabric sagging like collapsed bodies. The chandeliers, frozen in time, hung like skeletal remains above her head, their shattered glass glinting in the pale moonlight that seeped through cracks in the boarded-up windows. The hush of the theater was unnatural, a soundless void where even her own breath felt intrusive. She swallowed hard and stepped forward, her boots stirring up dust that had settled like a burial shroud. The stage loomed ahead, its warped wooden boards groaning under unseen weight. Shadows clung to the corners like living things, twisting as if they might lurch toward her at any moment. The sight of it sent a shiver through her, but she pressed on. Moving cautiously, she pushed through a side door leading into the backstage corridors. The walls were peeling, the wallpaper curled and flaking away like dead skin. A long hallway stretched before her, lined with dressing rooms and storage spaces. She pressed her fingers to the first door and nudged it open, revealing a room filled with dust-coated vanity mirrors. The bulbs around their frames had burst long ago, their jagged remnants glittering like broken teeth. A few of the mirrors were still intact, their glass murky, smudged with something too dark to be dust. As she stepped closer, her breath hitched. Were those fingerprints? Shivering, she backed away and moved on. Another door, another room. This one smelled worse, damp fabric and mildew. Costumes still hung from rusted racks, their once vibrant colors faded to lifeless grays and browns. The silence in here was different, heavier, as if something lingered just out of sight. A mannequin stood in the corner, draped in a tattered dress, its featureless face turned toward her. She felt a sudden certainty that, if she turned her back, it would move. Swallowing her fear, she pressed on, deeper into the ruined theater. She followed a narrow staircase downward, the wooden steps creaking under her weight. The air grew colder, denser, and with each breath, the smell of something old and foul intensified. At the bottom, she found herself in a small, forgotten room, A storage space, perhaps, but the walls felt closer here, the darkness more complete. A mirror stood against the far wall. It was unlike any she had ever seen. The frame was blackened with age, carved with intricate, twisting patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. The glass itself was dark, not cracked, not broken, but impossibly deep, as though she were staring into something beyond mere reflection. The mirror had been hidden for decades, its gilded frame suffocated beneath layers of dust and time. No one dared lay a hand on it, not the workers who had come to restore the crumbling theater, not even the looters who had stripped the place of anything valuable. It remained untouched, veiled in thick, as if sealing something in or keeping something out. A heavy velvet cloth covered part of its surface, but as Evelyn stepped closer, she saw something beneath it. A single bloody handprint, smeared against the glass. Evelyn knew she should have turned back, but curiosity always got the better of her. Evelyn's fingers quivered as she reached for the cloth, its fabric coarse and damp beneath her touch. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps, the air thick with the scent of mildew. The marionette had been sealed away for a reason, and Evelyn was about to learn why.